My wife, zolang Gesundtag had a Zayde, whose name was Mordechai Schusterman, Mordel Schusterman, who was a sweet, wonderful, humble, real human being. Of course, I spent some time with him. So he told me more than once that he knew Pinya Altes. There was a Lubavitcher Chassid in Eretz Yisrael, his name was Pinya Altes, Pinchas Altes, Pinya Altes. Pinya Altes was very close to the Rebbe, very close. They were born in the same city. He was born in Nikolaev, where the Rebbe was born. He spent his earliest years. And he was a chassid of the Rebbe. But there was a warmth, there was a closeness that was very real, very real. Pinya Altes was a first-class Chevraman. He was an extraordinary, charismatic man, extraordinarily charismatic man. He was just incredibly lovable and open and breit. His approach, his demeanor was incredibly powerful. There's no other word to describe Pinya Altes. And he didn't have two nickels to rub together. It was broke. He had nothing. He built Kfar Chabad. He built Lubavitch in Eretz Yisrael. He came to Israel in the 30s. And when the Lubavitcher Chassidim came in the 40s, and once, of course, the Rebbe, the Friedrich Rebbe, was no longer in Russia, he was able to communicate with the Friedrich Rebbe. He was very involved in all of the work that Lubavitch was doing in Eretz Yisrael. And because of his personality, he was able to do things and open doors that nobody else could. Again, I've been told, I've heard that expression, that he had geboit Kfar Chabad. His breitkeit opened doors that allowed things to happen for Lubavitch that could not have happened otherwise. He was a personal friend of President Shazar, Zalman Shazar, personal friend. And I read, there's a book called Nasi V'Chosid, which is a biography of Zalman Shazar. And he writes in the book that if Pinya Altes ever showed up in President Shazar's office, the day was shut, was finished, was over, because Shazar just forgot his appointments and forgot time and forgot what he had to do, and that was it. This was Chassid time. And when Shazar would meet a Chassid like Pinya Altes, it was, he would just melt. He loved him. And there was no such thing as making an appointment, there's no such thing as waiting. He would just walk straight into Shazar, and that was it. Now, Shazar became president very shortly before Pinya Altes passed away, I think. Maybe even after. But in his earlier post, whatever it was, he was involved in education. He had an open door by Shazar, and they were very good friends. And Shazar's secretaries hated him because they would make him a schedule for the day, and then Pinya Altes would show up, and that was it. It was over. He would sit in Fabreng as long as he wanted. And he had this charisma, had this incredible power that made him very powerful, very lovable. Even though, like I said, he didn't have two nickels to rub together, he was broke. There's a very interesting and unique letter from the Rebbe to Shazar when the Pinchas Altes passed away. He passed away very young. I think he passed away in 62 or 63. I don't know how old he was. Shazar wrote the Rebbe a letter after Pinya Altes passed away, asking the Rebbe to appoint a successor to his post. And the letter that the Rebbe wrote back to Shazar was, if I recall correctly, I saw the letter 20 years ago, but I believe that I'm repeating it accurately. You can't replace this man. It wasn't a job. It wasn't. You can't put somebody else in Pinya Altes' shoes because it wasn't an appointment. It wasn't what he did. It was who he was. 100 men couldn't do what he did because it wasn't about his job and his responsibility. It was about his charisma and his skill and his muhus. Anyway, why am I mentioning this? Because my grandfather told me that when Pinya Altes used to visit here, he was to say he knew him from Russia, obviously. He used to say, my grandfather told me that he said to Pinya Altes that you're not a man, you're broke, you're poor. You are in your head rich, in your mind, you're incredibly rich. It wasn't an act, it's who he was. He was extraordinarily powerful and self-assured and rich in his mind and in his character, even though he was financially broke, had nothing. Parenthetically, I just want to share this because this is a gewaldige Maise, that when the Rebbe left Russia, when the previous Rebbe left Russia, he forced his way onto the train. There were thousands of people who came to see the Rebbe off, thousands. And Pinya Altois was younger then, obviously, and he physically fought his way onto the train. I think you the Maise, this is a story they tell. And he ran over to the Rebbe. And he said, the Rebbe, he says, there are Tmimim, Lubavitch Chassidim, who are Lomdim, they can learn, they become B'di Chachamim. There are Tmimim that are Oivdim, they can daven. There are Tmimim who are Maskilim, who know a lot of Chassidus. He said, I don't have any of those things. All I had was you. And you're leaving. So what am I left with? So the Rebbe looked at him, and the Rebbe said to him, Pinye, milzich noch sehen. We'll meet again. Which was a very special bracha, because 95% or more of the people who saw the Frierdiker Rebbe off that day never saw him again. He was by the Rebbe, I think Tafshin Yud. He was there Tishrei, the last Tishrei, the Frierdiker Rebbe's physical life, and maybe earlier he met the Frierdiker Rebbe again. He was a Yid who in his pocket there were holes, there was nothing, but he was a reicher Yid. His mahus was rich. I heard a similar thing, although maybe not in the same way, about a chassid whose name was Zalman Schneerson. Zalman Schneerson was an extraordinary man, and I am not in the business of advertising, but I'm currently reading a book about a Yid whose name was Rab Aaron Mordechai Zilberstrom, who got his marching orders, who got his chinuch from Zalman Schneerson. He was with him during the war in France, and they ran from place to place to place, hiding and saving children. It was it's an incredible story to read. And you'll learn about this human being named Zalman Schneerson. He was a cousin of the Rebbe. He was an uncle from the Ravash. He was a cousin actually of the Rebleivik. And he was a big Talmud Chacham. He was a big chassid. And he was an incredible Askan Tziburi, an unbelievable public servant. He also was one of those people, didn't have two nickels to rub together, but he was rich. He was rich. The way he did his work was like you would think he had millions of dollars at his disposal, because he did. It wasn't in his pocket yet, but he'll have the money when he needs the money. And because he had this approach, because he had this mindset that he was rich, he was able to do things that only a rich person could do, even though the wealth wasn't his, it was somebody else's wealth. Why am I saying this? I'm sharing this with you because we're learning now the third shir on the Maamar Padah B'Shalom, Tafshin Chavav, which is quite a Maamar. And today's class, is going to discuss, in effect, three levels. The first level is parnasa. A person should have the provisions that he needs to live. In the Lashon HaPasuk, Dei machseirei ashi yechsalei. That all of the human lacks should be filled. The second level is called Ashiris, a rich man. The third level is higher than Ashiris, not more than rich. And of course, it's difficult enough to understand the line between a person who has parnasa and a person who's wealthy. It's certainly difficult to appreciate the line between a person who's wealthy and a person who's on a level which is above being wealthy. So let me first say the following. Being rich doesn't mean, al pi Torah, having more money. Whether you have more money or less money doesn't define you as wealthy. Wealthy is much more than a bigger pocket and more money in it. Wealthy is another level of panos. It's a different bracha. And there's no question that a significant part of the bracha of wealth is in one's head. It's not only in the pocket, it's in one's mind. The Mittler Rebbe, believe it or not, the Mittler Rebbe, in the introduction to the Sefer Derech Chaim, which is a Sefer of Musar, it's a Sefer that people learn during Chodesh Elul. It's about Tshuva, Chaymes Pasiyin, Hayridi Kanachal Dima. It's about Tshuva and it's about crying. The Agdom of Derech Chaim speaks about Yiras Ha'onesh, Yiras Elokim, Yiras Havaya, Yiras Chet, Yiras Elokim, Yiras Havaya. And in the course of that discussion, the Rebbe goes into a discussion about Ashiras, about being rich. And one of the things he says in the introduction to the Sefer Derech Chaim is that a person should never work too hard to become rich, because the blessing of wealth doesn't come from work. The blessing of wealth comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, there is a basic understanding, there's a basic belief, and frankly, it's an absolute truth if you get past the fear of not having parnasa and see things objectively, that the Eibishter is zon u'mefanas lakel. Hashem gives parnasa to everybody in the most interesting ways, and not necessarily the way we want it, not necessarily do we see it as Him providing for us, but the Eibishter is zon u'mefanas lakel. Hashem provides. Like the pasuk says, "B'chol asher tasa," you work, you make a keli and parnasa, u'barach havai lekecha. The Eibishter gives you a bracha. The bracha that the Eibishter gives for parnasa, based on the work that a person does not involve giving a person what he doesn't need. In other words, it involves providing a person what the person needs, not more, not less. Parnasa, sufficiency, enough. Ashirus, wealth, says the Mittler Rebbe, isn't simply more of parnasa, it's a different bracha, it's a separate bracha. And this separate bracha doesn't come in the same way, meaning to say, there's this very complicated balance that we all struggle with, right? What's the balance? One side of the coin is b'chol asher tasa, you have to make a keli and parnasa. If you sit with your hand folded, nothing is going to happen. The other side of the coin is a v'rach havaya lekecha, the bracha comes from the Eibishter. And if we worry so much and we work so much, because, so to speak, we don't trust that the bracha comes from the Eibishter, we make it difficult for the bracha to reach us. In other words, the concept of parnasa, as Torah explains it, is that you have to work, but you have to work in a way that you leave the Eibishter, the place to bring you the parnasa. And if you cut that off because you don't trust him, because you don't believe, or because you're very fearful, it makes it difficult for the parnasa to reach you. So there's this interface between b'chol asher tasa, your work, and the emunah and the betochen, which allows for the beracha Hashem alekecha. But that system, that interface, that relationship between the work we do and the parnasa we earn is about parnasa. Ashiras, wealth, it's a different bracha. It's not more, it's different. When the Eibishter gives a person wealth, it isn't that he worked harder and made more money. It's a different blessing. It's a besonder bracha. It's a different blessing. And it comes in different ways. In other words, the way Torah looks at it, it's not a scale. It's not like, poor, lower middle class, middle class, higher middle class, then the lower level of the upper class and so on and so forth. There's a division. There may not be a division in dollars, in a specific number of dollars, but there's a division in the nature of the bracha, what it is that the Eibishter is given. Ashiras isn't more money, it's a different kind of money. It's a different level of money. And like I said before, there's no question about it that Ashiras isn't only how much money you have in your pocket. Ashiras is a mindset. You have people who are very, very rich, and in their heads they're poor. And it's very, very sad, because then their wealth becomes a prison. Their wealth is an incredible opportunity, incredible bracha, but you have to value it, you have to appreciate it, you have to know how to manage it. And if you don't have a wealth, a richness in your mind, you have only a richness in your pocket, so then it clogs you up, you're stuck, and it's very, very depressing. It's not a happy, healthy way to live. So the point is, what I'm trying to bring out is that al pi Torah, Ashirus is a besonder bracha. It's a totally different blessing. It's a different blessing. The Mishnah says, right? This we all know. The Mishnah says, who is rich? Who is happy with his lot? Who is happy with what he has? What kind of question is that? Who is rich? A billionaire is rich. Who is rich? A man who has $100 million is rich. Who is rich? A person who has $10 billion. What do you mean, And of course, the answer to that question is the difference between having a lot of money and being rich. Or say it in other words, at what point are you rich? You have $100 million, you can have $1 billion. You have $1 billion, you can have $10 billion. So are you rich? You could be richer. And if you could be richer, are you currently in a state of ashidus, of wealth? And of course, the Mishnah answers, Hasameach b'chelke. What's the Mishnah doing? The Mishnah is giving a criteria for wealth that's unequivocal and not on a scale. That means the Mishnah wants to find wealth in the kind of way that will never change. If wealth is defined by a certain number of dollars, you have more dollars, so then the situation is different, is altered, is reversed, is changed. But if ashidus is something altogether different, it's in your head, so then whatever you have, you're rich, and the other person, whatever he has, he's poor. This is a criteria, it's a definition of wealth, which is absolute, which doesn't change. Now, what the Mishnah is saying is different than what we're discussing. I'm not saying that the Mishnah is saying the same thing as we're saying. But it allows to understand this idea that the Derech Chaim, that the Mittel Rebbe says in his introduction to the Derech Chaim, that being rich is not just having more money, it's a different level of money. And it's a different level of person. A rich person, it's not so easy to be rich. I mean, it's a different test, it's a different science, it's a different life. It has its strengths, it has its advantages, but it has its tests. Not only tests because you have wealth that you could use in a way that can be self-destructive. Tests how you manage the wealth itself, how you manage yourself, how you raise your children. Serious tests. The Rebbe had this famous debate with the Kapishnitzar Rebbe, where the Kapishnitzar Rebbe said, I'm afraid of wealth. So the Rebbe said, if a Jew has to struggle, let him at least struggle with a pleasant thing as opposed to an unpleasant thing. And the way that story ends is that finally, before the Rebbe left, he said to the Kapishnitzar Rebbe one more time, Kapishnitzar Rebbe, I want you to agree as Yidden soll sein reich begashmis. Jews should be wealthy begashmis. And the Kapishnitzar Rebbe said, Ich bin masken belev sholem. I agree with my whole heart. The Rebbe spoke Truma, Tavshin and Beis, a couple of weeks before the stroke, Mamish, that Vichuli Truma, the Hira is you have to be an Osher, to be rich. It's a Hira, as a lesson in the Torah, that they have to have ashidus, wealth. Anyway, getting back to the point. Torah does not see wealth as more of what an ordinary person has. It's a different bracha. It's a totally different bracha. Our Maamar discusses not 2 levels, but 3 levels. The first level is the Eibishter providing a person with what he needs. And of course, if he's secure emotionally, there's ashidus there too. You're happy with what you have. But it's sufficiency, it's dei machzer, giving him what he needs. The second level, the Eibishter gives a person wealth. Wealth means a lot of money. A lot of money in the kind of way that he's in a different state of existence. Not just he can spend more money, his whole consciousness, his whole awareness of self is very different. And it's, I guess, an absolute state. One rich man has so many millions, another rich man has so many millions, but they're all in the category of ashidus, of wealth. And there's no question that ashidus is not only in the pocket, it's in the mind. A rich person has a whole different sense of his life, his whole different sense of his opportunity and his responsibility and his prospects, his possibilities, what he can do. It's a very different existence. And in a certain way, in a psychological way, a rich person, a dollar more, a dollar less doesn't make a difference. I know that that's not true because a rich person knows the value of money. But in a psychological way, wealth is an absolute state. I'm rich. And therefore, a dollar more, a dollar less, it's a state of ashir, it's a state of wealth. So if we're able to understand these 2 concepts of Hashem giving a person what he needs and Hashem giving a person wealth in a healthy way, where the person is rich Rich means he has a lot of money, and rich means he knows how to manage that money and to make the best of that money and to sustain that wealth and to live as a rich person, both in terms of what he gives and how he preserves his wealth and so forth and so on. What could possibly be more than rich? In other words, if rich is not defined by a certain number of dollars, but it's a psychological state, it's a spiritual state, it's a different category of bracha from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is beyond parnasa, what could possibly be beyond rich? And I'm looking for words. I sat here for a long time meditating before I started giving the class, and I couldn't come up with a form that will help me represent it. So I said I might as well start the class. But what would be the difference between a person who's rich and a person who is above wealth? And I think perhaps the way to describe the difference is a rich man is the possessor of his own wealth. It's his wealth. The Eibishter, God Almighty, gave so-and-so a lot of money, an awful lot of money. He's a rich man. He's a rich man not just in his wallet, but in his mind and in his life and in his relationships. And the wealth that the Eibishter gives a rich man comes, so to speak, out of the pocket of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and into the pocket of that rich person. It's his. Higher than Ashiras is, if you will, if you have your hand in the Eibishter's pocket. If the wealth that you have isn't your own. It's Hashem's wealth. It doesn't mean you have less money. You can be very, very rich. You have tons and tons and tons of money. But the condition of your wealth is such, and I guess this is not only a dollar question, it's a mental question, it's a spiritual question, where the wealth that you possess isn't your wealth. It's Hashem's wealth. And when the wealth you possess is Hashem's wealth as opposed to your wealth, not only is it a lot, it's forever. Right? All of us know the principle of a galgal hachezer, that there's a wheel of fortune and it spins. It's mentioned even in Zohar. And when it comes to geld, this famous song that the Peretz Machkin al Shonfak Zinyan, es is rund, it's a wheel and it spins. Someone's on top, someone's on the bottom, and so forth and so on. But when the wealth isn't yours, when you're connected to the source of all wealth, the idea that a Yid can be incredibly rich, but he's in touch to the source, to the resource, to the way the money is connected to the Eibishter, that you can't lose. What would be an example for that? Frankly, I don't know, but I was thinking, and I'm thinking out loud, that you have in Chazal, the Gemara says, Rashi brings it, Chazal bring it, it's brought in Chassidus, that Yosef HaTzadik had shloisha matmoinias. He had 3 treasures that he collected from the whole world, and 1/3 was taken by Korach, 1/3 was taken by Haman, and the last third is going to be revealed when Mashiach comes. What exactly that means, that Yosef hid the wealth of the whole world that he collected during the 7 years of famine, and that Korach found 1/3 and Haman found the other third, it's obviously on some level material. We're talking about a certain amount of gold, a certain amount of wealth. But when Torah describes this, especially when Chassidus discusses it, this is, it's not just a thing, it's a concept. It's not just an amount, it's a level, it's a type of Ashiras. And our Maamar proposes that there is something more than being rich. Rich is an awful lot. It's an awful lot, not just because it's a lot of dollars, but because it is about a condition. Higher than Ashiras is that condition in an absolute way. You can't lose it because it's not yours, it's the Eibishter's. Now, I don't know if I explained that well. I don't think I explained it well. But I'm trying to find form, to find language to represent these 3 levels, because that's what we're going to be learning about now. And considering my limitations, I'm going to go to the text. In other words, I've tried my best to present these 3 levels, and now let's learn the Maamar. We're on page Mem Chasif Hey. The Maamar explains, Hashayches the Yevarchu Koi, the relationship between the idea of a bracha being brought to Koi. Bracket, Hamshacha b'malchus Koi. You bring a blessing all the way to the lowest level. Pardon me, Malchus, which is called Koi. Me'erin seif shalamayla me'ishtalshlus, from godliness which is above ishtalshlus, to the idea of chassidim, the chassidecha. Remember yesterday's class, right? You have last week's class. You have Yeducha Havaya. You have a level of Havaya that you can't understand, that you can't relate to. All you can do is have Haidah, submission. So what level of Havaya could that possibly be that's so beyond any person's hasaga that you can just have Haidah in it? And Yeducha Havaya comes all the way to the lowest level, Yevarchu Kai. What brings the highest level to the lowest level? A chassid. And remember the class that we discussed, Beklolos, this idea of Terasa Yom Naseh, in particular Terasa Yom Naseh of Rashbi, that one is totally removed and yet everything comes naturally to him without even having to ask for it, from the highest level to the lowest level. That was the discussion that we had. So the concept of a chassid is that when you're so deeply connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the bracha comes from the highest levels, in Torah, and therefore the parnasa happens without any effort. You don't even have to daven for it or ask for it or to goiz it. All you got to do is learn Torah. The personality that brings together the level of Yeducha Havaya and the level of Yevarchu Kai is the chassid. The chassid is the madrega of Terasa Yom Naseh, as we discussed yesterday. So the Rebbe now developed this idea further. Al derech ma shekosav Rambam, based on what it says in the Rambam in Pirush HaMishnah is hachiluk shebein chesed l'tzedakah. There's two. It says here Meir Nevuchim. Pardon me, Meir Nevuchim. The difference between chesed and tzedakah. Chesed means kindness, and tzedakah means charity, righteousness. Kabbalistically, I guess chesed is the first of the 7 midas, and tzedakah is the last of the 7 midas. It says the Rebbe tzedakah u'inyan hayeshin. Tzedakah means fairness. Tzedakah miloshin tzedek v'yeshin. The word tzedakah connotes righteousness and fairness. Los leistikalecha, to give each one kifi haroyle as he deserves. Of course, there's one of these classic, masterful sichas of the Rebbe. I think it's in the Kutei Sichas Chelik Beis. The Rebbe said this to the supporter of the Lubavitcher Yeshiva in the very first year or two after he became Rebbe, maybe in Yetishra Yud Beis, 1951 to 52. And he said that during the Yom Neroyim we say, Tshuva Tfilat Tzedakah, Ma'avir Nesrei Agzeira. And he observed that we mistranslate each of the three. Tshuva doesn't mean repentance, it means return. Tefillah doesn't mean prayer, it means connection. And tzedakah doesn't mean charity, it means righteousness. In other words, tzedakah doesn't mean I'm doing something that I don't have to do. And in doing it, I'm being a nice guy. I'm doing something which is just, which is right, which is the way it's supposed to be. When the Eibishter gives the person parnasa in a way that they can afford to support somebody else, helping that other person is tzedakah. It's righteous, it's correct, it's the way it's supposed to be. But how much do you give that person? What he needs. The chesed, who, as opposed to chesed, kindness, haflog, as hatev, an overabundance of good. Lehetiv, to be kind, yesei mashuroi, more than one deserves. Or maybe about Maamar, the Rebbe Rashab continues in his Maamar of Padah B'Shom Tefeshayin Hey. The Mashakos, the Rambam writes, Tzedakah means to give each person what he's entitled to, what he deserves, what he's fit for. This says in the Chumash about tzedakah, enough to fill all of his lacks. He has needs, real needs, and you satisfy them, that's enough. And the Gemara says, you have to give him enough to satisfy all the things he's missing, but there's no obligation to make him rich. On the other hand, kindness, that's an overabundance of good, lehetiv, to be good, generous, benevolent. More than one is entitled to, more than one deserves, more than one can ask for. This is giving abundant, a lot. This is not only about satisfying lacks, and the Rebbe says, ashidus, wealth. We're 7 lines, by the way, from the bottom of page Memches. Continues the Rebbe and he says, same is true on high, that there is a notion of the Eibishter giving us enough. And there's a notion of the Eibishter giving us ashidus. And in Mitzvah Hashem later, you'll see the third madrege, bli neder. Malchus is considered poor, right? Malchus has nothing. And Malchus has to be enriched. Binyan Malchus. Why must Malchus be enriched? Because Malchus feeds the lower world, and it cannot give somebody else what she doesn't have herself. So the more you give her, the more she can give to the next world. Says the Rebbe said there's two brachas when it comes to Malchus. The first is in Yanat Staka, when the Eibishter Kvayachol gives Staka to Malchus, means Huam Shachas Agile, the Eibishter is giving Malchus what? A benevolence, a bounty, an offering, an abundance, but Sheshayach Malchus, which is proportionate to what Malchus can expect and what Malchus is entitled to. All it does is fulfill what it's missing. And the Rebbe brings, like it says in Kabbalah, right in the Vayivarach David, there's three atas. Atu Hashem levadacha, then Ata Sisas Hashemayim, and then Atu Shabachat be Avram. So the second of these three atas in the Siddur, it's written Aleph Tov Hey, but in Tanakh, it's missing a Hey. And it's explained that Malchus is the source of the lower worlds. Each world is 5 subworlds. And Malchus. And Malchus has none of the richness of the light of all of these 5 worlds. Keser, Chachma, Bin, Izah, Malchus. And all that Malchus has is Rachitenius Malchus, which is Malchus the Malchus, which is interesting. Malchus the Malchus is, you almost never see the term. In this Maamar, Malchus the Malchus is used. Malchus the Malchus means the Keli Sheba Kli, no oil at all. Not a little bit of it, but no oil at all. So Malchus by itself is missing all abundance, all richness, all light. It just has its existence. And tzedakah fills in the lacks. And instead of missing the 5 partzufim of Kesach, Chochma, Bin, Izah, and Malchus, it has the 5 partzufim. But that means that there's no chesed, there's no lack, but that's all it means. On the other hand, when Eibishter doesn't only give tzedakah to Malchus, he gives chesed to Malchus, Hamshachas, Gili, Eir, Shalamayla, Mishachas, Malchus. It's bringing a light which Malchus is not entitled to. It has no relationship with Malchus. Shenim Shach Malchus, that comes into Malchus. So that Malchus is getting something which is not associated with Malchus. And of course, when I was thinking about this, as I was preparing, I thought to say that it's not only that Hashem is giving Malchus more than Malchus is entitled. Hashem is actually giving Malchus the wallet, the kli, to hold that wealth. You can't give a person wealth that they can't manage. When you give Malchus a brocha, leha, Malchus has a wallet, Malchus has a hand, Malchus has a pot, a dish, it's empty, and you fill it. You're satisfying wants, needs, lacks. When you give Malchus beyond that, you can't just give, you also have to give the capacity for Malchus to receive. And that's the meaning of the words, L'mayla mishaychas lamalchus, because you aren't only giving Malchus wealth, you're giving Malchus the capacity to hold that wealth, because Malchus has nothing to do with it at all. It says in Zehar, who is a chassid, the one who does chesed with his maker. And the word that uses chassid, and of course the connotation based on this Rambam is chesed means you're not just giving what the person is missing, giving this person an ashirus. But the kun is there interprets im kaneim kandile. How are you giving the Eibishter this chesed? Because you're giving it to his nest. In other words, kaneim means the Eibishter. Kandile means the nest of the Eibishter. You are kind to the Eibishter by giving his nest. How do you give Hashem anything? Hashem doesn't need us. The idea that we're b'chlal in a role of giving to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is very unusual, because usually we're in the role of taking from him. Only the biggest tzaddikim are in the role of kvayachol giving. And how do you give koinai? By giving kinai. How do you give HaKadosh Baruch Hu? By giving his nest. And he says, koinai is zo, atzilus. Because we know from the nusach of Kiddush Lavana that Baruch Cheni is atzilus. Ki atzilus nechal kinyan, and zo seif atzilus. The kandile, the nest is malchus, like it says in the Padah that malchus is called kan. And you're kind to the Eibishter by filling his nest. Says the Rebbe, filling his nest doesn't only mean giving the Eibishter enough to fill all the lacks. This is about Ashiras. The inyan hames chased im kandile, the notion of being kind with the nest, is shemamshech b'malchus. You're bringing into malchus something which is not at all associated with Malchus's needs and Malchus's lacks and so forth. Gili Eir Chadash, a light that's called new, and the connotation of the word new is very deep, and I'm not going to go into it. You're not just giving back to Malchus what Malchus lost, you're giving something to Malchus what Malchus has no business with, which is called Ashiras. And again, he uses the word wealth. Says the Rebbe, Binyan Asfiris is Pnimius HaKesed, Atik. Chitzenius HaKesed is ain't safe. Kesed is ain't safe, right? But Chitzenius HaKesed is the level of ain't safe which is connected to Gilui. Gilui means it's for somebody else. And since Chitzenius HaKesed is Gilui and it's for somebody else, when it reaches Malchus, it's for somebody else based on Malchus' capacity. Pnimius HaKesed is for the Eibishter himself. So when the Eibishter gives you Pnimius HaKesed, he's not giving you what is for you, he's giving you what is for him. That's Ashiras. That's wealth. When from this second level of Kesed, the lower level of Kesed, which is called Arach, which is also infinite, but it's the infinity which is meant to serve creation, comes to Malchus ubechlal, sudden it's only satisfying what Malchus is lacking. The key, because Arach is still, after all, the beginning of the lights that are for the sake of the world, that exists to serve and to provide for the world. It's only that it's infinite, it's too much for the worlds to handle, but it's meant for the world. It's about light which is the sake of the worlds. If this light is not revealed in Malchus, Malchus is lacking it. Because whatever the Eibishter gave for the world, the whole world wants, including Malchus. And if Malchus is lacking it, it's a chasar. And when this light reaches Malchus, the lights which the Eibishter gave for the sake of the worlds have to reach the worlds. And when it reaches Malchus, Malchus is now not missing anything, but that's it. As opposed to Pnimius HaKesed, which is a level of godliness which was not destined for the world. It's how godliness is for the Eibishter himself. And therefore, when this is brought to the world, this is not giving the world what it needs or what it lost, what it's lacking. It's Ashiras. That's the end of the source of godliness, as opposed to the godliness that's manifest. Which is higher than Netzal. This is godliness which is not about the worlds. It's not even godliness which has an indirect relationship with the world. It's a godliness that has no relationship with the worlds. When this is brought forward, it's called Eir Chodesh. It's novel. And it's not about satisfying a lack. This is called Ashiras. This is called wealth. So those are the first two levels. Yeah, tzedakah is dei machseri ashiach, so like to give what one is entitled to, what one is missing. And chesed is to give Ashiras, wealth. And of course, the Rebbe is describing wealth as something which is not at all proportionate to the world. The world doesn't need it. The world isn't missing it. Because it's not about the world, it's about the Eibishter. And the Eibishter sometimes gives Ashiras also. So the Rebbe continues in Perek Vav. We're in the middle of page Memtes. The Rashab proceeds in the Maimer to say the following. The Gemara says that tzedakah is for poor people. Kindness is for poor people and rich people. Tzedakah means I give you money. It's yours. Ashirim, Gemilas Chasadim means I give you a loan. I want it back. A rich person doesn't need your money. He may want to borrow your money. It has to be carried over for whatever particular reason. So Gemilas Chasadim is for Ashirim. Because the idea of Gemilas Chasadim is not about giving a person what he needs, but making it possible for a person to have much more than he needs. The fact that there's a phenomenon of Gemilas Chasadim which is for rich people as well, Movin explains that when the Eibishter gives real chesed, it's even higher than the level of being rich. In other words, the very fact that Torah says that there's a person who's called an Osher who still needs a Gemach, there's a person who's rich who still needs to borrow, that itself indicates that there's a limitation. If I can't, a rich person is always thinking how he's going to make more money. And the old expression is, the easiest way to make money is with money. So he may need help acquiring even greater wealth, but it's in the category of Ashiras. The source from which he gets that support is a level higher than the Madrega of Ashiras. In other words, there's a person whose wealth is such that he doesn't need ever to borrow or to take from another. That's not Osher, that's more than Osher. An Osher sometimes needs. Not he needs because he's poor, faket, he needs because he's rich. The Rebbe observes, superficially you could think that the idea that a rich person needs to borrow money is because he wants to have more of the same. The idea that a rich person is given something is simply making him more rich. In other words, it's not a different category, just more of the same. But the Rebbe Rashab says no. He says when you give something to a rich person, it's not more wealth, it's something different, it's above wealth. It says the idea that the Eibishter gives kindness, which is even above the category of wealthy. It means to say, when you give him this additional wealth, or you provide for him the support that he needs, which is going to get this additional wealth. Says the Rebbe, it is now something which has a relationship with. Since yesterday he didn't have it, and today you're giving it to him. Says the Rebbe, even though he's in the realm of deserving it, meaning he's rich to start with, so it makes sense that you would give him this kind of support, this kind of assistance. Says the Rebbe, the fact that he needs you to help him get richer proves that he's not really rich. Because if he was truly rich, he wouldn't need that support. Says the Rebbe, therefore he has to say that when a rich person needs help, the help that he's getting is not to attain greater wealth, but it's something which is higher than the phenomena of wealth. The Rebbe insists on saying, when the Eibishter gives kindness to a rich person, it's shefa shemitad chesed. This abundance that comes from this kindness that even a rich person needs is lemaila mi madregas oshir. It's not in the category of rich, it's in a different category completely. Hainushu besug acher legamri. It's a whole different category. So what he's missing is not more of wealth, it's more of something which isn't wealth at all. And therefore, the fact that he doesn't have it doesn't make him not rich. In other words, the logic is, if a rich person needs somebody else's help, so either it means that this other person is helping him become more wealthy. But then you can make the case, the fact that he didn't have that greater wealth means that he wasn't really rich before. So therefore, on the other hand, the very idea that a rich person needs somebody's help indicates that his wealth is not real wealth. Says the Rebbe, because this is not wealth, it's something more than wealth. And this is, so to speak, the introduction of this third idea. Yeah, the first idea is deimach seirash yechsel. You give a person what he needs. The second idea is to give a person wealth, and wealth doesn't mean a little more money, even a lot more money. It's a different level of existence. It's a level of existence of self-sufficiency, of confidence and certitude and obligation and responsibility, and so forth. The third level is not even about wealth. It's something altogether different. And again, I don't know how to describe the difference between the second and the third level. So I'm just going to say again what I told you in my introduction. The second level is the Eibishter gave you a lot of wealth, that's your wealth. The very fact that it's yours is a limitation, because you're finite. The highest level is that it's not your wealth, it's the Eibishter's wealth, and you have your hand in his pocket. That's infinite, that's true. It's not just rich. In other words, not just that I have the security and the confidence and the perspective and the vision and the opportunity that a rich person has. This is a very different thing. And the Rebbe wants to explain now, not the difference between the first level and the second level. The first level is to satisfy all of your lacks and your needs. The second level is not about satisfying lacks, but giving a person something at a whole nother level, where they just, besides for having what they need, they have a certain power and confidence because they have so much money. Now we want to understand the difference between Ashiras and what is higher than Ashiras. So the illustration for this is the difference between Shlomo HaMelech and what's going to be when Mashiach comes. The Rebbe goes into a quite lengthy discussion on the nature of Shlomo HaMelech's kingship and the wealth that we associate with that era. So we're doing now Sif Zayin. In order for the Rebbe Rashab to explain the difference between the second level, which is a concrete condition, an absolute condition of wealth, and the third level, which is even higher than wealth. Magdim ba Maamar, the Rebbe prefaces Bir in Yinashidus Shayib Me Shleime to explain what it means that Shlomo Melech was rich. Parenthesis Darga China Shabashir, it's the highest level of wealth, but it's only wealth. Right? Shlomo Melech was incredibly powerful, incredibly rich. It was his wealth. Mashiach is going to come. It's not going to be his wealth. It's going to be the Eibishter's wealth. It's very different. Or Mavayir, and he explains, and the Rebbe is really going to celebrate the Madrega of Shlomo Melech. It's true that the times of Shlomo Melech Havakaimes, so the moon was full. And of course, the moon meaning full is that Malchus is not missing anything. Says the Rebbe, who is Neitha was that first of all. The fullness of the moon, it was the 15th generation, right? If you count, it says in Rabbeinu B'chai, in Pashas Vayeshev, that from Moshe Rabbeinu until Tzidkiyahu, 30 generations. Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. So the moon is born. The Jewish people who are compared to the moon are born. The generation of David and Shlomo is generations 14 and 15, and then it's declining until the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed. But of course, the good news is that after the moon disappears, it's Noila, that's reborn in the subsequent generations, and so forth and so on. And like it says in the Kiddush Lavana, Sidim l'chadash kamesa, we're going to be renewed like the moon is renewed. But David and Shlomo, the moon is full, figuratively, mystically, generationally, and the idea of the moon being full is that Malchus has no chesed. That's level one. But in addition, Nimshach Ba'gam Gili Pnimiyas HaKesed. At the time of Shlomo Melech, the moon was full. There was no lack in terms of what a person needs, what the Yid needs. But in addition, there was also Pnimiyas HaKesed, which means Atik. That means godliness, which was never destined for the world, is godliness as it exists by itself. And this was made available to Shlomo Melech. Umeha Ashirus, the Malchus Knesset Yisrael, because at that time, Malchus of Atzilus not only had everything it possibly needs, there was no Chasarim, but had Ashirus. Yidden down here were extraordinarily rich, and he develops it plainly. It says, Rabbi Nimshacha Ashirus Muflaga Li Yisrael Gam Lamat. The Jewish people on earth were extraordinarily wealthy, exceedingly rich. Ashirus Muflaga Bagashmias, they were very rich materially. Va'ad, this is a pasuk. She'ein kesef nechshav me'shleim l'mu'uma. In the time of Shlomo Melech, kesef had no value whatsoever. And I'm not sure if kesef means money or kesef means silver, which means as opposed to gold. But in addition, there was ashiras meflaga beruchnias. The condition was ripe for the Jewish people to be incredibly spiritually rich, tuned in. In the time that Shlomo Melech, the Beis HaMikdash was built. What was revealed? The Beis HaMikdash is incredibly great revelation of godliness, which is Yeser Me'agilush Haya B'Mishkan. Shaya Kaidem, the revelation of godliness in the Beis HaMikdash is even higher than the revelation of godliness in the Mishkan. Why? Because the Beis HaMishkan, the Mishkan's godliness was not on the earth. It was only in the structure. You pick up the Mishkan, you move from place to place. The old place where the Mishkan stood has no Kedusha. Right? Think about it. It says in Chumash that and Rashi explains that when they would come to a place and put up the Mishkan, they would take sand, Mizbach Adoma, and fill the entire copper Mizbeach HaNechoshis. And this sand was what supported the Mizbeach, that's how they made fires, etc., etc. When they moved, they would pick up the Mizbeach, which was Nevuv Luchis, which is by itself hollow, and just leave that pile of sand. That pile of sand yesterday was a mezbeach for karbonos. It could have been used on Yom Kippur and so on. And now it's desert. It's nothing. Because the Kedusha did not extend to the earth, right? The Rebbe says that the Mishkan was chai and semeach. And then the diamond was silver. But the earth didn't have a permanent holiness. In the Beis HaMikdash, the entire Beis HaMikdash is made of rock, purely of diamond. And the earth has a sanctity. There's something permanent about the Beis HaMikdash. And consequently, the godly presence in the Beis HaMikdash exceeded the godly presence in the Mishkan. Well, moreover, the Rebbe makes an observation. The fact that in the times of Shlomo Melech there was incredibly great revelations has two stages. Number one, Gam lifnei shenivne Beis HaMikdash. Even before the Beis HaMikdash was put up, he already had these great revelations. He was in a position to put it up. The very fact that he was able to build it, David HaMelech designed it, David HaMelech put the money aside for it, but Hashem didn't let him build it. Why not? Dam Lorev Shafach, he was a warrior, and Shlomo Melech was an Ish Shalom. So Shlomo Melech's right to build the Beis HaMikdash was a symptom of his wealth, of his peace. As the pasuk says, Shleime Yihye Ish Menucha. He will be a man of serenity, of peace. V'shalom v'sheket eten Yisrael b'yam. There will be peace and quiet over the Jewish people during his times. V'lachein hu yivne bayis l'shmir v'gemer. That's what qualifies it to build the Beis HaMikdash. So Shlomo Melech's wealth precedes the building of the Beis HaMikdash. Faket, that's what qualified him to make it in the first place. V'yadua, it is known, the fact that all non-Jews were bottled to Shlomo. It was politically so. He was such a powerful presence that nobody even thought unfriendly thoughts. His power was such, his political power, his military power, his wealth, and his prestige, his respect on the world stage as a great intellectual and a great philosopher and a great thinker was such that no one would even think a contrary thought as it related to Shlomo HaMelech, who shahayu betelim, what? Bittled them, hagili edin sof shehed ayadi, because they sensed in Shlomo HaMelech a presence that wasn't him, it wasn't human, it was godliness. Right? It's called Kisei Hashem, the throne on which Shlomo HaMelech sat. It's called the seat of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And all of this came before the building of the Beis HaMikdash. It's what qualified him to build the Beis HaMikdash. This also touches not just the fact that this political situation of his time was peaceful because nobody would dare rise up against him, but it's also on another level. People actually came to sit at his feet and become his disciples and learn his wisdom. So superficially they did it because they knew he was a smart guy, they wanted to learn from him, or because they knew he was politically powerful and they wanted to find favor by showing subordination, by listening to him. The real reason was they sensed that this man is inspired by something above his own humanity, godliness, and they were drawn to that. Mashiach, it's written the same idea. The nations of the world are going to flow to Mashiach. And he explains what's going to draw the world to Mashiach Tzidkenu, they're drawn to the godliness. Says the Heilige Rebbe, Shlomo HaMelech's personality, Shlomo HaMelech's time, was a time of incredibly potent presence of godliness in the Eibishter's world. And the Rebbe says the light which pervaded, which filled the world, it filled Shlomo HaMelech's personality and spilled over to the world around him. Says the Rebbe, Moshach Elov es hanetzutit sheba'amim, drew the godly sparks which was embedded, which was hidden in all the nations around, bedugmas avuka, like a torch, shemeshachas eleh kol hanetzutit, that draws to itself all the sparks. V'kivan shahagilu sheheyed oz hayagilu na'da b'yeser. So obviously, the political power and the charisma and the dignity and the respect that Shlomo HaMelech was held in had to do with a great godly light which manifested upon him, which bittled everybody and drew everybody to him. Even very remote sparks of godliness that were very far away, also drawn to the light of Shlomo HaMelech. Like it says in the pasuk, number one, that she heard about the greatness of Shlomo HaMelech, and number two, she came. So hearing about Shlomo HaMelech was a symptom of the fact that his influence was far-reaching. His wisdom, his power, his wealth, his charisma reached people very far away, and it humbled them. It gave them a perspective on themselves, and it drew them to him. And all of this existed in the times of Shlomo HaMelech, even before he built the Beis HaMikdash. Says the Rebbe, but that's not really the issue. The real issue is the Beis HaMikdash. In other words, the Rebbe says Shlomo HaMelech was incredibly great. Great enough that there was the godly presence in his time in the Beis HaMikdash. But he was also great enough, he had enough godly presence to have built the Beis HaMikdash. But the real manifestation of godliness in the time of Shlomo HaMelech was not before he built the Beis HaMikdash, only after. This is what he continues to say now in Siv Ches. V'hinei, the fact that we call him a man of peace, and he elevated sparks. How do you elevate sparks to be a man of peace? Because habirur shebeyamav hoya v'derech menucha. The sparks were drawn to him in a peaceable way. His presence just shone a light that drew sparks of godliness from all over the world. There was no need to wage war, to struggle, to engage. To bring clarity to the sparks. The sparks were drawn to him automatically. She is bar, they should be clarified and uplifted and purified and built into the Eibishter's crown. Says the Rebbe, even though it existed even before he built the Beis HaMikdash, but hoya zebi ikir ayed agil sheheyer be Beis HaMikdash. So before the Beis HaMikdash was built, he was on a great enough level to be the one to build the Beis HaMikdash. But what the Beis HaMikdash gave him, in terms of godly presence, which was the basis for this incredible wealth, material wealth, spiritual wealth, intellectual wealth, personality wealth, that drew the world to him, was primarily from the Beis HaMikdash, because it was permanent. And that makes a very interesting comparison and contrast. Just briefly, it's, we know from Chassidus that there's two ideas. There's Torah and there's Tefillah. I'm going to make this quick. There's Torah and there's Tefillah. The difference between davening and learning Tefillah and Torah is that Tefillah is called war. The Zohar says, Shas Tzleisa, Shas Kravo. When one prays, he's at war. He's at war with himself, he's at war with his heart, he's at war with his Yetzer. And the process of prayer is to emotionally engage and to impassion yourself in a way that the passion spills over to the animal soul, and that's the war to transform the animal soul on his level of passion. What's the opposite of davening, which is war? Torah. Torah is peace. What does it mean that Torah is peace? Torah is called oyer. You simply open the book and you learn, and the Eibishter gives you light. So we associate tefillah with war and Torah with peace. Where do you have in the Beis HaMikdash war and peace? Where do you have in the Beis HaMikdash tefillah and Torah, davening and learning? The answer is the Mizbeach and the Aron HaKodesh, the holy altar, the Mizbeach, and the holy ark. The Mizbeach has a place of karbonis, which is a war with meat and so forth, that has to be dried by heat and burn up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the seat of war, of struggle, prayer. And the holy ark, which is the Holy of Holies, is the seat of Torah. These are basic ideas in Chassidus. And as you may or may not know, the Rebbe has classic siches where the Rebbe brings a famous argument between the Rambam and the Ramban and Mesiya Masechta Midas about what's the most important thing about the Beis HaMikdash. Is it the Aron or is it the Mizbeach? The Ramban holds it's the Aron, the Ramban and the Pirush on Chumash. And the Rambam in Mishnah Torah says they build a bias lahakra bei karbonos. The most important thing is about karbonos. It's two different aspects in the Beis HaMikdash. Our mind is talking about peace, not about war. Yeah, our mind is talking about peace. What is the metaphor for peace? Torah and the Aron. We are now going to discuss peace and war as it relates to the Torah and the Aron itself. So it's a little bit subtle. In other words, don't make a mistake. The Rebbe will now present to us the difference between the Mishkan and the Beis HaMikdash. The mobile house of God, which I explained before, the Gedusha is not in the ground, it's only in the structure. And the permanent and never-changing, but once you come to the place, you're not allowed to bring karbanos any place else because it's permanent and it's absolute. And we're going to say that the temporary house of God, the Mishkan, is like Milchama, and the permanent house of God, the Mikdash, is like Shalom. What's going to be unusual about this? We're not going to talk about karbanos. We're going to talk about the Aron, Torah. In other words, we're going to say that there's war and peace in peace itself. There's struggle and peace in the Torah, which is represented by the Aron itself. What's going to be the difference? Very simple. In the Midbar, the Aron traveled. And Rashi says, Chazal tell us, that the Aron used to travel and flatten out all the mountains and raise up all the valleys and kill all the venomous snakes and scorpions that could have hurt the Jewish people traversing the desert. So the Aron traveled ahead of them, and it encountered all kinds of obstacles, and it healed them, it remedied them before the Jewish people arrived. And it did it b'derech oir. The Aron had the Torah inside, the luchas inside. And it did it by shining a light. But there's one aspect about the Aron's journey to prepare the path for the Jewish people, which is clearly one of war. And that is, you go to the place of the engagement. Torah sits in its place and shines a light, and everything is drawn, like he described in the previous Padah, by Shlomo HaMelech. Now we're going to be talking about Torah and Torah, not Torah and Tefillah, but a Torah of Milchama, which is how the Torah goes to where the Klippa is to be Mavaret, B'derech Oyer, and our Torah sits in its place and is Mavaret from the distance, B'derech Oyer, and the sparks are drawn automatically. Now let's read, okay? And of course the Rebbe's point is that Moshe Rabbeinu is a time of war, the Mishkan is a time of war, even the Torah of the Mishkan is a time of war, and the Beis HaMikdash is peace. And of course the point is going to be that although Shlomo HaMelech was peaceable, was in a state of Shalom and Ashidus, before he built the Beis HaMikdash, it was primarily achieved when the Beis HaMikdash was put up. So here we go. Says the Rebbe, I'm on page Nun, and I am 8 lines to the bottom of the page. We know that the Mishkan, the temporary, the mobile house of God, the tabernacle, had a light that fixed the world, including the light which shone in the Holy Ark, which is a inyan from Torah, which is Nyani Sholim, says the Rebbe derech milchama, also was engaged in a war. As opposed to the clarity in this world, the uplifting and transforming of sparks, which was achieved by the light which shone in the Beis HaMikdash, just as B'derech Menucha is in a peaceable way. And this, of course, is a little bit unusual, because usually you associate the Aron and Torah with Shalom, and here we're saying that the Aron and Torah, if it's moving to the place of the Birur, is already an inyan from Milcham. The Zeir says, Train inun havud amru kuma havaya. Two said, stand up, God, kuma havaya. Who are the two? Moshe and David. Moshe Rabbeinu says, kuma deshem, stand up, HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'yavut, su'evecha v'yanus, u'masanacham mipanecha, the Eibush has enemies. And the Eibush has those who hate him. And the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu disperses them and makes them run away. And then Yabbai David HaMelech, who said, Kum havayalem nuchasecha, they should get up not to go and destroy enemies, but for the sake of peace and serenity. Umavu erba ma'im, the same Padah b'shalom tafashayin here, the Rebbe Rashab explains. The tabernacle and the Holy Ark traveled through the desert to defeat all klipas in the desert, which meant physically, to flatten the terrain. And also to get rid of the nechashim, strafim, vakrabim, the snakes and the venomous snakes and the scorpions. To bring a clarity and uplifting. To the sparks of holiness found in Klippa, says the Rebbe, even though it's being done by Torah, it's b'derech milchama. It has similarities to war. Why? It's kamei melech sheyetze mimkemi. It's a king who goes out of his place. V'heilech l'medina sa'ayev, and travels to the place of his enemy, li'ilacham bei, to engage with him, or l'kafshe, and to conquer him. Now, even if after he arrives, he defeats his enemy not by engaging, but by shining a light, the fact that he had to move from his place to where the enemy is has an aspect of milchama. V'lachein, which why Moshe Rabbeinu says, "B'negel in the siyas ha'aram b'midbar," as much as the Holy Ark travels ahead of the camp through the desert. V'hi ben say ha'aron, that Moshe Rabbeinu says, "Kuma ha'vayev yafut su'evecha," stand up, ha'yachal HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and your enemies are going to disperse. Says the Rebbe, the yeshno ma'yev, there are enemies. Shetzarach lilcham hem, you have to fight against them. And the nature of the conquest is going to be yafutzu and yanusu. Later on, the Rebbe is going to say, you're not transforming them, you're not destroying them, you're sending them off. As opposed to the light that shines in the Beis HaMikdash, which also brought clarity to the world, is b'derech menucha, it's peaceable. The shleima hayabim came, shleim sat in his place, vanitzutzeis, and the sparks from all over the world, them shchalav mi'atzmam, came on their own to him. From the Chayin number David with David HaMelech, who's of course speaking about the Beis HaMikdash, which would be built in the generation of his son. Kum Hashem lemenuchasecha, Hashem should stand up to a condition of serenity. Ulahoyer. And now the Rebbe makes the observation that I just made. The Bekama Mekemis Mevur. In many places in Chassidus, it's discussed. The Abirur Shahoya Idei Nesiyas Ha'arim Bamidbar. When the Aron travels through the desert for the sake of Bidur, the Aron is Teira. It's Bidur B'derech Menucha. It's a peaceable, it's a serene kind of Bidur. Because when he talks about going to a place and shining a light which uplifts sparks in a peaceable way, it's because there's no fight. You shine a light and there's a clarity achieved. The destruction of the klipa and the extraction of the good sparks within them and bringing them to Gedusha. It's a light which shone in the Mishkan, which shone in the Aron, which shone in the Luchas, which shone in the Teira. So B'derech Memela, it created this clarity and this uplifting automatically. L'chein Gama Bidur Shai Aron the Mishkan. When the Aron goes from place to place and shines its light and affects a clarity, it's B'derech Menucha, it's also peaceable. So in one aspect, the Kuma Vayev Yafutzu Evecha V'Yinusum Esanecha Mipanecha that Moshe Rabbeinu says. The holy ark that travels around and is Mavadet Nitzutzis by going to those places has a peaceable aspect. He says, never, but the truth is that that's also war. Why? Because why do you have to move from your place? Stay where you are and do it. True notion of peace, seven lines on top of page Nun Aleph now. It's Shamavader Eine Yedid Lamakam Mizbara. The one affecting the cloud doesn't go from his place. Elanim Samim Kevi stays where he is. A great light shines from the one affecting the clarity on the one who the clarity is reaching. And he's drawn automatically to the one providing that clarity. Says the Rebbe, this kind of peace was only b'meishleimei dafke. It was achieved through shleima. So although the Aron is also Teira, which is shalom, but the fact that the Teira has to go l'makam hamizbar is an element of war. And the Rebbe now compares it to Niglan Chassidus. The comparison is as follows: that be'inyan abira shadei Teira, Teira affects clarity, yeah. The beklolos gam abira shadei gali Teira b'derech menucha. All Teira is peaceable, whether it's Nigla or it's Chassidus or it's Kabbalah, makes no difference. All you do is learn. And simply studying in the Teira, in the Beis HaMedrash, in a protected environment, that also this is permitted, this is prohibited. The klipa is automatically lifted, like it says in the Gesh, that when you learn Teira, of of klipas, which never come down into the physical world altogether. It's not like davening, which is the takal milchom, shas sleisa shas krova, like I explained to you earlier. Shuai derev shel kis mislabeshes b'nev shabhamit, to go into the animal soul and so on and so forth. Says the Rebbe lachein gama bidur shuai degali the Teira nikra bidur b'derech menucha. When nigla the Teira learns and creates clarity in the world, it's also peaceable. Why? You're in a yeshiva, you're not in the street. But if you want to be very precise. Sure, when you're learning Nigla the Teira, you're not getting your hands dirty. You're just learning about things that are dirty. But the fact that in learning about Nigla the Teira, you're involved with things that are dirty, it's Yeredes or Mislabeshes ben Yonam Agashmim. At least intellectually, you're descending into physical things. And therefore, it constitutes war. Like a king who leaves his place to engage with an enemy where the enemy is. True clarity in a way of serenity is only ba'abirur shayadei pnimius hatera. Pnimius hatera doesn't discuss anything unclean. Everything is holy, everything is pure, everything is sublime. And the light of Chassidus reaches and uplifts the deepest and the darkest sparks and brings them back to Gedusha. So we're contrasting Moshe Rabbeinu's Teira, and we're calling it Milchama, to Shlomo HaMelech's Teira, and we're calling it Menucha. And the Rebbe continues, he's not done yet. This contrast between the bidur of the Aron that travels through the Midbar, which is a bidur b'derech Eir, but it's called Milchama because it's Yotzim Mimkemi, and the bidur of Shlomo HaMelech through Teira, which is the way he sits in his place and the sparks come automatically, says the Rebbe Da'achiluk. I'm doing Sif test now. Yes, page 9. Sha'achiluk ben Kuma Havaya Sh'ama Moshe. The Kuma Havaya Sh'ama David. The difference between the Kuma Hashem of Moshe and the Kuma Hashem of David, even though they're both Teira and both them are Teira Eid, says the Rebbe Hu B'Shnei and Yoram, there's two differences between the two. What are they? Number one, be'efen habirur, how it's achieved. What's the difference? That one has to leave his place and one stays in his place. Bracket. Sha'abira de ha'aron de mishkan ha'bederach milchama. The way the aron and the mishkan brings clarity is called war, because it has to leave its place. That even after you send them off, you defeat them, they're still your enemy and your hater. There's a opposition, those who hate you, those who oppose you, and those who hate you. You have to fight with them. In other words, and even after you send them off, you've just dispersed them, but they still exist. The clarity in the time of Shlomo HaMelech. Or befrat al yedei yilid de Beis HaMikdash, especially in the Beis HaMikdash, is b'derech menucha, kuma d'Hashem menucha secha kanal baruch. There's no enemy. The light is so powerful that there's no enemy that's being sent off. V'gam ba'abir atzmi, in the way the clarity is affected. D'zeh shebekum havai sham meishin and b'futz of Yenusu. That Moshe Rabbeinu defeats an enemy by scattering them and making them run away. It's a vishagam la'achrei abir, even after the clarity is affected. They didn't see as Aron b'midbar, but the Aron journeying through the desert, nishar adayin menagim. There continued to be opposition. Eivecho misanecha alashchaya be'efan the afutzu. They were scattered v'nusu and they ran off. So what's the difference? The difference is, number one, that you're shining a light and you're dealing with an enemy. You, the one who's shining the light, acknowledges an enemy. And number two, even after you finish dealing with the enemy, he's still an enemy, but he's been chased off. In Menucha, you don't even address an enemy, you just shine light. And whoever is out there is fixed without you engaging with them. And number two, the enemy is totally transformed. He no longer exists. V'ha'inyin and the meaning of these 2 points, Eifen habirur, and birur atzme, in other words, when you acknowledge an enemy and you don't defeat him completely, or you don't acknowledge an enemy and you do defeat him completely, is explained as follows. When a clarity is affected from above, meaning, and the one shining light doesn't get involved with the one on whom he's shining the light. And therefore the lower one is being clarified by light alone. You're not digging and engaging in a struggle. It says the reason the one below is not opposing is not because he chooses not to oppose, but to the contrary, the light which is reaching him is beyond him. When you shine a light, and you shine a light in such a way that all confusion disappears. The confusion hasn't been disconfused. The confusion has been overwhelmed. Take away the light, the confusion will still be there. But the nature of the light is that it completely destroys the confusion from above. When this clarity is affected, the very fact that you're going to shine a light that's going to clarify and transform an opposition, but you have to go to his place in order to do it, proves, this is proof, that the light which is reaching the one below is relative. Why do you have to leave your place and go there? Why can't you shine the place where you are? And the answer is because the light's not going to reach that far. No, if the light's not going to reach that far, that's a limited light. So even when you move, and your mavada b'derech oir is still called milchama because it's the kind of oir that cannot reach meirachi. V'lachein ein shayich. It's therefore impossible. Shadei gili ha'er shalei yizbatel hatachten betachos. You should transform the one below completely. In other words, if you are engaged with an enemy and you want to defeat the enemy b'derech oir, but you say you have an enemy, that means you have a relationship with him. And therefore, when you're mavada him, he's not totally transformed. He's just pushed off. When you have an enemy, and you don't even mention his name, you just shine a light, and he disappears, it's because the enemy is not at all reckoned with, is not at all in your sphere, and therefore when the light is mevatel him, it's total. Even though that this clarification, this bidur has happened from the top down, it's not by you getting involved and struggling, but the influence of this light is not total transformation. You have to go there to be mevatel them. When the bira is complete, nishar adayin, page nun beis now, behelam etzias de menage devecha masanech. When you go to where your enemy is and you obliterate him with light, the need to go there means that enemy has a place in your world of light. So even after you shine that light and you destroy him, he's still there. At the same time, kiva this light which reaches him, which is not completely beyond him, has some relationship with him, but it's still above him. This light is enough to be mevatel take of the tachten, to destroy the take of the tachten. Light is always different than darkness, right? When two nations fight and they're equal, like the Nefesh HaLokis, the Nefesh Bahamas, they both stand the chance of winning because they're engaged. They're hitting each other. When the Lokus shines oil, you're not engaging with the Klippa. Klippa cannot win. But if the light is close enough to the Klippa that it needs to engage with the Klippa by going to the Klippa, it doesn't destroy it altogether. As opposed to when the clarity is affected in a peaceable way. In other words, the light which is affecting the clarity never leaves its place because he's not even acknowledged it as an opposition. He's just shining light. He's not shining light on an enemy, he's shining light. And the enemy is destroyed. When you shine a light on an enemy, the very fact that you're shining light on an enemy means that that light is not going to obliterate that enemy completely because the enemy has a tfisa smokum to that oil. As opposed to when you're simply shining a light and the enemy is automatically dispersed, destroyed. You don't descend to the place of the one trying to be mavarer. The one you're trying to uplift has no relativism, no relationship whatsoever to the light. And therefore, the Gili Erzeh, this light is enough that a bitl latach and a bitl batachas. So the Rebbe explains that there's a difference between two birurim of oir. Let me just, so to speak, slow down a little bit, right? The classic idea is that there's two ways to create clarity in an entanglement. The first is to sit there and disentangle it, one hair at a time, one knot at a time. So when you do that, you get so involved, you get entangled yourself. Another way is you shine a light and it automatically disentangles. We're describing a disentanglement, a beater through oir. But we're separating two levels of oir. An oir that acknowledges that there's an entanglement that needs to be disentangled. And an oil that doesn't even acknowledge that there's an entanglement that needs to be disentangled. And the difference is, if you acknowledge there's an entanglement that needs to be disentangled, that means the light has an indirect relationship with that confusion, and even when you make a clarity, it's not total bittul. On the other hand, when the light which you're shining doesn't acknowledge that there's an entanglement, it's simply light, and the entanglement is disentangled, the birur, automatically then you're talking about a light which is totally above the klipa, and therefore the bittul of the klipa is complete. Shleim Rabbi Mekei says the Rebbe, let's explain Shleim HaMelech's birur b'derech shalom further. So far we have contrasted the oren, which travels to the place of the klipa to mevarer by shining light on the place of klipa. So even though it's b'derech shalom, because it's shining light, it's called mulchama, because you have to go to the makam hamizbarer, which also have an erech. Mashenkin, Shleima HaMelech sits in his place, says the Rebbe, the idea that Shleima sits in his place as Mavarer also has two levels. The Gam, Kesha Bidiru Be'efen Shamavarer Rehu B'mkeme, even when you're like Shleima HaMelech, where one sits in his place and affects a clarity, a disentangling of entanglement. Simply by shining light from its place, it's possible that it should be B'darga Kazu, that the level of light which is shining from the place, from the source, to the thing needs to be clarified as that the thing being uplifted has some relativism. And in that case, if Shlomo Melech sits in Yerushalayim and he shines light, and just by shining light he elevates the whole world, but in, so to speak, spiritually he has a relationship with the Menagid, that's not the Bittul B'tachlis. So in other words, there's two parts. Number one, Shlomo sits in his place. That's number one. And number two, Shlomo sits in his place and relates to Klipa in a way that Klipa has no tfisas makam lagabe whatsoever. And only then is it bittul betachlis. We can now explain further. Shamash Maamar points out to this. The fact that Shlomo was a man of peace wasn't only because he sat in one place and shone light, but because he shone a very high light. The moon was full ashidus. Shlomo was rich, which is beyond just having all lacks and needs met. Because it wasn't only that Shlomo was mavared the world by staying in his place, Shlomo was mavared the world by staying in his place with a light which is called ashidus. The true idea of serenity and peace is when the enemy is totally bittled. In order to affect a total bittul in the menagid, you have to have a light that relates to the opponent as if he isn't there. And that's called ashidus. Which is Eidin Seif Shalamayla Mishaychas Leilamis. It's godliness which is above the world's atik. The Be'ed Hashayech Leilamis, a light which has a closeness to the world. In other words, Chitanius HaKeser. Even Eid which is Keser. Even Chitanius HaKeser has a relationship with the world. What I said in the beginning of the Shir. The Eibishter created that light for the sake of the world. The very fact that the Eibishter created that light for the sake of the world, even though it's Seviv, means that the world has a tfisas makam to it, and the bir is not betachlis. Consequently, the bittel of the opposition in the world, through this light, bittel is not the highest level of bittel. The fact that Shlomo was a man of peace, and there was peace in his times, in his time there was ashiras. So, we learned two things only, right? The class started with satisfying a lack, filling in all things missing. And now we talked about ashiras. What is ashiras? Ashiras is not more wealth. It's wealth of a different level. Wealth of a different level which obliterates anything which is the opposite of that wealth. Totally. And it obliterates it without even engaging with it. Like I tried to describe, the psychological component of wealth is that wealth doesn't mean I have more money, it means I have a different state of existence in my head than in my heart. Now, I really wanted to read Padah Yud today, but the class has gone on for too long. So the next shir, which will be the last shir on this Maamar, is going to be the end of this shir and a new shir. In other words, Padah Yud, which is going to introduce us to this third level, L'maylam Abchinas Ashiris, is really a part of the shir we gave just now. And then we'll learn Mitzvah Shem, the last shir, which is Padah Yud Aleph and Padah Yud Beis.